Have you had any talks with the younger guys that are up and coming about our global game and that presence and the impact of that?
For sure. I think myself, KD, Brown, we tried to emulate that, not just with words, but how we conduct ourselves. I think the opportunity to have that reach, I think you see it more and more for the young guys. They're a little bit more sophisticated and polished than even we were when we were coming in. But those conversations do happen. I think, not just what you do on the court, what you do off has such an importance of your legacy. And I think guys understand that responsibility more and more at a younger age.
We know you're not playing, but at the same time...
Let me be straight with you. The Golden State Warriors are not rebuilding. They are not in a transition year. They are not planning for the future. They are planning for right now, because right now, Steph Curry is still playing at an all-star level, still draining threes from the parking lot, and the window, while not slammed shut, is closing faster than anyone in San Francisco wants to admit. So the question this offseason isn't whether Golden State goes after a marquee player. The question is who, and more importantly, who is actually attainable. Giannis Antetokounmpo is the dream. Two-time MVP, physical freak, the kind of talent that makes front offices lose sleep imagining what he'd look like next to Curry on a championship roster. Milwaukee is shopping him. Every team in the league is picking up the phone. Golden State will absolutely make that call. But let's be honest with ourselves. That deal is enormous, it's complicated, and the competition for his services is going to be ferocious. Dreaming about Giannis is easy. Actually landing him is a different conversation entirely. The name that deserves your attention right now, the name that makes real basketball sense, is Donovan Mitchell. Here's why this matters today. The Cleveland Cavaliers are down 0-2 to the New York Knicks in the Eastern Conference Finals. Game 1, they blew a lead. Game 2, they lost by double digits. They head back to Cleveland for Game 3 in a must-win situation, staring down the barrel of an Eiley exit. And the worse Cleveland goes out, the louder the questions about Mitchell's future get. Dan Faval of Bleacher Report put it plainly earlier this week, Mitchell is young enough and talented enough that the Warriors could sell him as both their immediate solution and their long-term foundation. He's not just a rental. He's not a stopgap. He's the kind of player you build around, and right now the circumstances around his situation are shifting by the day. Now let's talk about what Mitchell actually brings to the table, because sometimes in these trade conversations we throw names around without grounding it in what the player does on the floor. Donovan Mitchell averaged 27.9 points per game this past season, 5.7 assists, 4.5 rebounds, a steal and a half per night. He shot 48% from the field and 36% from three on nearly 9 attempts a game. He was a first-team All-NBA selection. He finished 7th in MVP voting this season, and has finished between 5th and 7th in 3 of the last 4 years. He's not winning MVP. He's also not losing you games. He's the kind of guy who shows up in the fourth quarter when the game is on the line and makes you feel like your team has a real chance. Put that next to Steph Curry, who averaged 26.6 points, 4.7 assists, shot 46.8% from the field and 39.3% from deep, and you're talking about one of the most dangerous offensive backcourts this league has seen in years. 2 guys who can get their own shot, 2 guys who create gravity on every possession, 2 guys who force defenses to make impossible choices every single time down the floor. Curry just turned 38 and has 1 year left on his deal, but both sides have signaled interest in an extension that could add 2 more years at something close to $140 million total. His shooting has always been the part of his game most resistant to age, and he continues to prove that every night. This is not a guy fading into the background. This is a guy who still belongs in the conversation about the best players on the floor. And Mitchell, for his part, has 2 years left on his $150 million deal, with a player option in the 2027-28 season. That player option is the ticking clock Cleveland is sitting under. If the Cavs don't give him a reason to stay, he walks after next season and they get absolutely nothing in return. That's the leverage Golden State has. That's the crack in the wall. But here's the complication, and it's a real one. The only way Golden State makes the money work in a trade is by moving Jimmy Butler. Butler carries a $56.8 million salary next season, and without him in the deal, the financials simply don't line up. The Cavaliers would have to look at a 36-year-old coming off an ACL injury and ask themselves whether that's what they want. That's not an automatic yes. That's a hard sell. But think about what Cleveland would actually be getting. Butler, even coming off an injury, is a two-way force when healthy. He brings toughness. He brings defense. He brings playoff experience. And critically, his contract becomes an expiring deal the following summer, meaning Cleveland could flip him at the trade deadline or clear nearly $57 million in cap space heading into the 2027 offseason. That's not nothing. That's actually intriguing, especially for a team that might be reassessing its trajectory. Golden State would also need to throw in draft capital. At minimum, one first-round pick, possibly more. You don't acquire an All-NBA guard without giving up future assets. That's the price of doing business at this level. So the full picture is this: Butler plus picks heading to Cleveland, Mitchell heading to Golden State, and a backcourt forming in the Bay Area that would give every team in the West a reason to worry. That's the trade. That's the vision. And whether or not it happens depends almost entirely on what unfolds over the next week in Cleveland. If the Cavaliers get swept or exit in 5, the pressure to avoid walking away empty-handed in the summer becomes enormous. A front office watching its star player approach free agency is a motivated negotiating partner. And a Golden State team that knows its window is measured in Curry years, not rebuild years, has every reason to be aggressive. This isn't about chasing nostalgia. This isn't about one last ride for old time's sake. This is a franchise calculating exactly what it takes to compete for a championship right now, while the greatest shooter who ever lived is still doing it at an elite level. Mitchell at 29, Curry at 38, playing together in Golden State. That's not a fantasy. That's a trade call that could happen the morning after Cleveland goes home. The offseason hasn't started yet, but the clock already has.